Hello everyone, Jester Bell is back finally with a new comic review. Today I am going to review a brand new comic, The Joker's 80th Anniversary Special. This is an anthology book with about 10 different stories by various writers who've handled the Joker before, and you get a really interesting look into his character throughout the years through these writers who have handled him in the past. Both good and bad. So we're going to go through this and talk about the different stories and how they're written and how well they do. First, I want to talk about this artwork on the cover. I spent about $40 on this comic just for the cover. It's by Stanley Lau, nicknamed Art Germ, and this is one of the best drawings of the Joker that I've ever seen. I really am a fan of the Brian Boland art for him. I just think that this is really perfect, where it's not too parched. Sometimes I think he's drawn a little too thin and a little too scrawny. I'm not really a fan of the Jim Lee design. This one looks very much like the animated series version, the Brian Boland version, and it's just a perfect depiction of him. And even though it's Rebirth Harley on the cover, obviously I'm gonna like that as well. I just love the expressiveness in this artwork here, and I just had to buy it. Yeah, but $40 almost for this comic, actually $37 to be exact, but that was the best price. This is going on for $100 elsewhere and $150 just for this artwork. So yeah, great artwork. It's definitely a great addition to my collection. So going on to the actual stories, the first story is called Scars, written by Scott Snyder, and Scott Snyder's take on the Joker is very famous for being one of the most dark takes on the Joker, and one that really treats him like a horrific monster, not really a man, but a monster, a force of nature, and just someone who literally hides under your bed trying to scare you. This kind of being that can't be defeated. And people have different feelings towards Scott Snyder's Joker. Some really hate how he's just written overblown as this really disgusting evil character, and I have mixed feelings on it, but I like this particular story we have here because I do like a scarier side to the Joker. I like a lot of different versions of him, and I think that this was just a really great story to reinforce the fear factor of the character, especially when we see so much of him and sometimes he isn't a scary character anymore. It depicts a psychologist who's trying to get Joker victims to not be afraid of him anymore and to not believe that he is this force of nature and this being that can understand your worst fears and exploit them. And apparently the Joker hears that, and then he discovers the psychiatrist's worst fear somehow and is able to exploit that. And then that last shot of the book is the psychiatrist, after he's been attacked by the Joker by his worst fear, he falls on his own floor in his own house, and he sees the Joker under his bed. How did he get there? I don't know. And then he just disappears. And it's a really good take on just how scary this character can be. So no matter my feelings on Scott Snyder's Joker regularly, I thought this was an excellent story. It gets a 9 out of 10 for me, and a great way to start the book. Now the second story was called What Comes After a Joke, and it's supposed to be the origin of the new Punchline character for James Tynion's run. And I'm not a fan of this character. I was clear I wasn't really into the idea of her in an earlier video I made, and I really, so far I'm just having those feelings justified. So far I haven't really seen anything new from her character that we haven't gotten before with various other Joker sidekicks and groupies, because there have been a lot of them over the years, and a lot of people just don't seem to realize that these concepts have been explored many times before. What I really don't like about her is they play her up as this geeky college student, which I think is very weird to have as the Joker's new girlfriend. I'm not sure if she's an actual girlfriend yet. We have to see how the story plays out. But it doesn't really seem like a character he would connect with on that level. She seems like someone who he'd lead on as someone who kind of believes his ideology and is kind of a fan of him as if he's a rock star or something, and then shoot in the face. That seems like the kind of character this would be. But one of the problems in these anthology books is they have a problem with balancing, understanding that they have a very short amount of time to convey a story. And this is really the worst case of that in this book. We see she basically just monologues her entire ideology and her entire origin. At the same time, we don't really find out much about her. She's basically we live in a society meme and I'm not like other girls meme brought to life. and she just monologues about her believing that, of just because society's terrible, and I want to be like this. I don't care what other people say. They need to realize some people want to be like this, and that's been done before. It's been done with the Joker. It's been done with other characters associated with the Joker, and I think that they're trying to say something, like trying to tie it into how some people's mentalities today, but it's kind of just become a meme so much that I just can't really take it seriously. And I also really hate how she has to get out her phone and do her little murder on Instagram, because that's been done before with characters as well these days, where they somehow think it's going to be relevant and interesting if you make a character into a millennial, and it kind of makes it just cringy. You could do it in a scary fashion, but I don't find that here. And again, I'm not seeing what the Joker really sees in her. We don't really get to find out her actual origin, who she was in the past, and we don't get to find out how she actually came into contact with the Joker and how this is really set up. It's very rushed, and it really doesn't work for me, and I'm just not really liking her character for me, and I don't think that this was well written as an origin. So I'm gonna give it, I give it a 1 out of 10. I really am not a fan of this character, or how hyped up she's being, when I'm just not really seeing the writing that is worthy of the hype. So, and I'm not seeing her as a worthy character for the Joker either. So let's move on to the next story. So we got a really good one and a really bad one. The next story we've got is called Kill the Batman, and this one I have mixed feelings on, and I'll just put it shortly. It's about how Batman is supposedly killed by the Joker, and everyone is honoring him, and the Joker is angry that people are able to find happiness in celebrating all that Batman has done for him, and then he realizes, what am I going to do now that Batman is dead? And there's a punchline at the end of the story about what he would become, and spoilers, he becomes like a DMV, a horrible person at the DMV, and that's funny, but I don't think it's the best story. I felt like I feel like there's a lot more complex things that would happen if Batman died, and how the Earth would react to that, and how the Joker would react. It's a good little punchline story, but it's not really the best that I've read here, and I think there's better you could do with it. It gets a 5 out of 10 from me. So then the next story number 4, that last one was by Gary Whitta and Greg Miller. I have not heard of him or his work on Joker before, but the next one I am familiar with, called Introducing the Dove Corps by Denny O'Neil. He wrote the Joker back in the day, I think more in the 90s, and he wrote a much sillier Joker. I'm very familiar with his work. And so I was interested in reading this, just to go back to that kind of era of a sillier Joker, but one that's still pretty violent. And it's okay. It's not a great story. It's about how the Joker decides he's sick of killing people, so he's gonna go join something called the Dove Corps, and their whole vow is to not kill people. And in the end, it's kind of funny to see how he acts with these people and how he reacts to them. And in the end, he's just like, to heck with it, I'm gonna kill all these people anyway. So it's interesting to see that kind of meshed era where you've got kind of the campier Joker of the 60s and the darker version that he would become, but it's not that great a story. It's just nice to see that era represented. So I give that a 5 out of 10 again. Next book is The War Within by Peter J. Tomasi. It was an odd book. It was more of a poetic take on the Joker and about how he is and who he thinks. It's the one story that didn't really stick with me throughout this book. It just went through him and how he feels about Batman and who he is. Peter J. Tomasi, I think, is very hit or miss with his stories. Sometimes they're really fun and entertaining, and sometimes they're just odd. So I'd say I give it a 6 out of 10 or 6.5 out of 10. Lower rating so far, but we're gonna get better into it. I just wasn't as into that story. So the next story we have is called The Last Smile by Paul Dini. Paul Dini might be one of my favorite Joker writers because he wrote him in the animated series, and Mark Hamill Joker is pretty much, to me, the definitive take. So I'm interested to see what Paul Dini does with him here, because I consider the animated series really his Joker because he wrote him the most out of any of the other writers. And he likes to do a Joker who is very violent, but he also likes to do him with a little more depth than that and a little more complexity. For example, in the Arkham games, he wrote him as someone with a real fear of being forgotten, a character with actual fears, a character who has a giant ego and is afraid of that getting hurt. So this story represents Joker and his worst nightmare, and he imagines that he is on death row finally, and that he's going to die, and everything's going well for his big exit, and then Batman shows up and laughs at him, and that he just can't take that. And it's told through Harley's eyes, and that she tells that Joker used to have this dream every night that this would happen to him, and she talks about how it really exposed his vulnerabilities to her, and I thought it was a really interesting take. This is why I like Paul Dini's take. I think he's able to do the Joker with a little more emotion without taking him away from what he's supposed to be. I don't like the art in the issue at all. It's really weird. It looks really ugly, and it's another one with another take on, oh well, Harley's over the Joker now, and that kind of really invalidates all you want to explore with the characters in that way, and I'm like, please stop doing that. So that gets a 7 out of 10, a bit better but a bit more flawed. I mainly had a problem with the artwork, and it was bad enough so it stood out to me, and how Harley's being written, because it's like, Paul Dini, you built up all this stuff with these characters that was good, and then you just want to go around with people these days that want to tear that down. Stop doing that. So the next story, I believe we're on story number 6 now, are we? It's Birthday Bugs by Tom Taylor. Interesting to get Tom Taylor to write a Joker book, because I've heard him say before that he really hates Joker. But this wasn't too bad a story. It's a different take on him again. It's very different than Scott Snyder, where we see the Joker, he meets a child who's been abandoned by his father on his birthday, and he kind of sees a darkness in this child. And so the Joker goes through, he feels like this child needs to have his birthday party like he wants. And so in his own morbid way, he goes through town threatening everyone and forcing them to give this kid a birthday party. And he threatens his father. It's in his own very twisted, morbid way that he needs to give this kid his birthday, and he cuts off his fingers, saying that, threatening him, you better give him his party, and you didn't, because he was an ex-Joker henchman, and he's like, and I will come and get you for trying to escape from me. So it was an interesting take, and I was surprised by it, because Tom Taylor has said in the past that he doesn't like the Joker, and I haven't liked what I've seen him do with him in the past, but this was interesting to see. Maybe that dislike of Joker has made him decide to do something different with him. So again, a little bit similar to Paul Dini, he's able to write the Joker as who he is in a violent sense, but also with a little bit more depth and a little bit more of the unexpected. So that gets a 7.5 out of 10 for me. It was a pretty good story, and something I was very happy to read. So the next story we've got here is called No Heroes by Eduardo Merdero. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Something a little lower on my list. It's just basically that it's a very, very simple story in the book, where he meets someone who tried to be a hero and who tried to stop him, and he decides, and he explains to the kid why there's just no stopping him, and then he ends up letting him live anyway. And I'm not sure why. It wasn't the best story in the book. There's really nothing much more to say about it. That's what he chose. That's just what the writer chose to do with it. They're just like, okay, someone tries to stop Joker, and he tells him that that's impossible, but for some weird reason he lets him live. It wasn't very great. That gets a 4 out of 10 from me. So the next book we got is Penance by Tony S. Daniel. Another one of the stories that never really stuck with me. It's one where there's a cop who's just feeling really low about his life, and low about he feels that he needs to kill the Joker, and he feels that that's wrong, because they try not to kill, but there's only so much they can handle with the Joker's character. And basically this one, again, didn't really stick with me when I read it, but it ends up that the Joker shows up and reveals himself to be the priest and takes him out. So kind of the threat of, you better take out Joker now, or you're never going to be able to. So, and again, not the best story in the book. It gets, I would give it a 5 out of 10. Again, most of these I say are 5 out of 10s. They're just fine work, fine to read, but they're not really that great. The next book is by Brian Azzarello. And Brian Azzarello is a very controversial writer these days, and I don't agree with everything he's done. He does have a rather interesting things to say about the Joker. This is the weirdest issue in the entire series, and it's about what Arkham looks like through the eyes of an inmate when you're there and you're being tortured and you're being put through all this therapy and you don't know what's reality and what's not. It basically, like, the Joker is there and he keeps hallucinating different things. He hallucinates different weird conversations in Arkham. He hallucinates that Batman shows up and gloats and tries that there's this like gold statue that they have to pick up, and that if you pick it up then you can leave there or something, and Batman can't pick him up and no one can. And it's just weird, and I had to read it a couple times in order to get it. It's supposed to be weird. It's supposed to be this fever dream. You don't understand what's going on. You don't understand the reality. It's just all this weird stuff. and you've got this nurse who tells the Joker in a very meta way that he's just a comic character, he's just this cartoon that children love and is put on merchandise, and that's this really meta thing because a lot of people theorize that the Joker might be aware he's in a comic, and in the end he picks up the gold statue and throws it through the window and escapes. And it was a very weird story, and I was really not sure how to rate it because it's a very risky thing to do because I didn't understand it at first, and I think it's one that could really go over the audience's head. I think I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10 though, because very strange but very interesting to read. It's just very surreal, and I like weird. So again, Brian Azzarello, very controversial. I think he does have some talent in him though, even though some things he's done I really disagree with, like some things he did in the animated adaptation of Killing Joke. So as you can tell, overall very mixed bag. There's a couple stories in here that are just great. There's some that I'm really glad I've read and that were just, you know, solid stories, and there's some that I just feel like middle of the road. You know, most of these I say were probably just middle of the road to read. I would still recommend to read this book. I think that they did well enough for a comic release today on just depicting how the Joker can be portrayed and how he's been portrayed over the years. And I would recommend picking it up and checking out for yourself if you're a Joker fan of how, and you get to see all the different evolutions of this character and how people view him, and you can make up your own mind how he should be written as a character. The more scarier, completely black version, the more emotional version, the more silly version. So yeah, definitely pick up this book. Maybe you won't want to spend $40 on it, but it's a recommend from me just to decide for yourself. I'm a pretty harsh reviewer, just so you know. So the entire collection gets a 7 out of 10 for me. That might sound a little high. I just feel like it's worth reading even if a lot of it was average. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.